Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And what I told you earlier today, it's a little bit different. We had two judges coming on, actual real life, not Judge Wapners, real judges, and may he rest in peace. I love Judge Wapner. However, the two judges could not make it. So what do you get instead? You get a law professor, Joe Patudo. You get Tim Jansen and Daryl Cohen, who's walking around Atlanta trying to get in position for the camera. So we'll have him in a moment. And today, I just decided this about 30 seconds ago. We're going to discuss the sort of the 5 biggest things to look out for ahead of the Donna Adelson trial. The 5 biggest things to look out for ahead of the Donna Adelson trial. And of course, as I just mentioned, we, by the way, are much less than a week away. Steve Cohen and myself getting ready to pack up that Bronco and head up to Tallahassee. Tim Jansen, I'm very obsessive about my new Bronco. Do not allow food or the kids near it. The kids can come in sometimes. There's Daryl Cohen, steady as can be, steady like a rock. Tim Jansen, I'm obsessive about my new car. I love it. I feel like a man because I'm driving around in a Ford Bronco. Not quite as manly as Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was on yesterday. What are the chances that of all the people, Steve Cohen spills a 64-ounce drink and or leaves Frito-Lay's crumbs in the wake, and then I go there and see it as a disaster because of Steve Cohen?
94.7%.
Yeah.
Tim, what do you think? Higher or lower?
80%.
Yeah, these aren't Cheerios. Steve Cohen would never eat Cheerios. Someone said Cheerios. He's like a Doritos potato chips kind of guy. So, Cohen, I'm inspecting the Bronco after every passenger ride that you're in. Without further ado, let me introduce these fine guests, starting with the professor. She simply goes by the professor, but her real name is Joe Patudo. She's the Richard H. Larson Professor of Constitutional Law, Emerita at the University of Nebraska College of Law. She's also taught North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Oregon, Arizona, Rutgers, Seton Hall, Cardozo. She also drafted the Supreme Court, a Nebraska Supreme Court project to draft uniform jury instructions. So she's done that. She teaches Crim Pro, as the law students like to say, criminal procedure. She's done a lot, and she understands the law inside out, as does, there goes my iPad. As does, we're in a cramped space here, everybody, as does Tim Jansen, who is Tallahassee's most famed criminal defense attorney, part of the firm of Jansen and Davis. Figure out what happened here. And what a disaster. He spent 5 years as a federal prosecutor. Shows off to a stellar beginning. And last but not least, Daryl Cohen. He is my correspondent emeritus, I guess. He is he's the father figure of the show, I think, Daryl Cohen. And he is an entertainment and criminal defense attorney, partner of Cohen, Cooper, Sept, and Whiteman. He's been doing this a long time, and he still plays pickup basketball, which is amazing.
Tennis, please.
You prefer tennis over hoops?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Basketball and tennis.
There you go. So, earlier today, we were watching this hearing. It was really interesting with Tim Jansen and myself, and I got something a little bit wrong because I didn't know the order of exactly what happened. But it turns out that it was Attorney David Marcus who made the call to Craig Isom. We're going to get into this. So instead of talking about it and explaining it, the COE cut down a soundbite here, and I'm going to play it for you. Kaylin, excited for y'all traveling to Tallahassee. I got to start saying y'all. Looking forward to your lives and watching Donna squirm. A member of STS Nation, it's unbelievable, just sent me a Tallahassee, an FSU jersey, which I'm going to sport up in Tallahassee. to Tim Jansen's dismay, being a Gator guy that he is. But I will sport that on the show at some point. So thank you. And the COE said I have to mention this. Starting Tuesday, when we start with jury selection, we are going to be on this channel, not on the Best Trials channel. And everyone from Best Trials will be basically brought over here. Nothing will change for you, but we're basically going to do the morning session, lunch lives, afternoon session, and then hopefully Tim Jansen is going to open up that law firm, and we'll do the evening shows at Jansen and sponsored by Jansen and Davis. These shows. So there you go, our first real sponsor. So without further ado, let me get rid of COE is the best. Here you go, and got to say this: Go Knowles. That just scrolled up on me. Here, we're going to listen to this together. This is Alex Morris in court this morning, making an argument to Judge Stephen Everett. Essentially, they want to subpoena Charlie Adelson's lawyer, which they have, and have him testify. The state said, we don't really care. And he's explaining the reasons why. There are three basic reasons, and then we'll have the professor and the others break it down. Here we go.
Doesn't seek to elicit any testimony related to Mr. Marcus's attorney-client protected conversations with his client. There are three categories that the defense seeks Mr. Marcus's testimony. The first is the state's indicated, and they reaffirmed to Your Honor, that they intend to ask Investigator Isom whether or not Mr. Marcus called immediately after Katie McManua was arrested. The jury, if left there, the jury takes away that someone or somehow the defendants are all in cahoots, if you will. The defense believes that Mr. Marcus would testify that that is not the case at all, and he would provide information as to how it was that he received information about Ms. McManua's arrest and how he knew to call Investigator Isom. That's the first category. The second one is the state has investigated vigorously to try to pinpoint that the Adelson family has provided legal fees for other lawyers or other co-defendants in the case. I don't know whether the state seeks to elicit testimony of that nature, but as recent as January of this year, the FBI was down in Miami speaking with Mr. Marcus about such things. Mr. Marcus provides an explanation that doesn't involve attorney-client privilege. That didn't happen. Mr. Marcus made a suggestion of the potential legal strategies involved, but nothing ever came to fruition, and there were no discussions with any co-defendants or the Adelsons. And then the third category, Judge, is there's a text message between Mr. Marcus and his client, Charlie Adelson, at the time, about him having seen or bumped into Katie McManua outside of his office. And there's a comment about something to the extent of it being a coincidence, but there was no conversation that was had. Again, if the state elicits that testimony in all three of those categories and it's left hanging, it goes unanswered. But in each circumstance, Mr. Marcus is able to respond, and I don't believe that it invades the attorney-client privilege.
It seems kind of, if you're not a lawyer, maybe a little benign, but this is an important motion. And Joe Patuto, let's tackle point number one. He basically breaks it down into three things. And the first one is, how did Charlie's old attorney know to call Detective Isom? And the I guess the implication here is that it furthers the conspiracy because something Katie McManua knew tipped off Charlie Adelson's attorney. Am I right about that?
I believe so. The sound for me at the beginning wasn't great, but I believe that's right. The timing is certainly suspicious, and that's I think why the state wants to introduce it. That is, they arrest Katie, and within minutes they're getting a call from Charlie's lawyer asking if he's going to be arrested. And obviously, the question everybody has is, how could he possibly have known so quickly? Part of David Marcus's answer was, well, lawyers, if they think their client is going to be arrested, of course they call to find out. And that's certainly true. The other part of it was how did he know so quickly? And I think from what I was able to hear this morning, that his testimony is going to be that he didn't hear it in the context of a group of, well, he's certainly going to say it wasn't a conspiracy, but not in any kind of group arrangement with the lawyers. And you never get, or I shouldn't say never, it's uncommon that evidence that's introduced by one side is subject to no response by the other side. Typically, there's a response. It may not be strong, sometimes it is, but typically there's something on the other side. And the defense clearly wants to have some way to rebut the inference that they're all together, and that's why he knew so quickly, and that's why he could call so quickly.
Tim Jansen, the state basically said, and I want to continue to kind of deconstruct this. So the state basically said, we don't really need David Marcus. We can do this, I guess, with another witness. We'll quash the subpoena, meaning he doesn't have to come, which is what Marcus wants. But the defense continued to push for it, and now he was told he's going to have to testify probably on September 30th. By the way, Daryl is the international man of mystery, so he's in a mysterious place. It's not the other guy. I don't know if that's Tecate or Dos Equis, but it's really Daryl. Tim Jansen, why is the defense so insistent on having, in your opinion, David Marcus testify?
Well, they don't want the inference that there was a conspiracy and tying all these people, especially the Adelsons, to Magbanua. The state loves to have the inference hanging out there. I was shocked they subpoenaed him in the first place, unless they wanted to try to depose him. But they don't have a fight. And you saw David, he doesn't want to come, even though it's probably not privileged this point. And it's not unusual that you're representing a defendant and there's multiple targets have it, that if one gets arrested, you would want to call and make sure your client doesn't get picked up. And if he's going to get arrested, you self-surrender so you don't have to do the transport. That's not unusual. I don't think it's protected. It doesn't sound like it's privileged. And Marcus is going to have to come up even though he doesn't want to.
Yeah. Tim, I feel bad. I like the drive up there. It's soothing to me, but even Ryan Fitzpatrick started to cry about it. I'm kidding. He got emotional.
Except for the potato chips.
Except for the potato chips. Yeah, exactly. Daryl Cohen, you're in Atlanta, so you're close enough to Tallahassee. Do you find this interesting that Charlie Adelson's attorney now is subpoenaed and is set to testify, and it's the defense asking for this? Because you would think it would be the state, but Tim just alluded to the fact that they want to prove that there is no conspiracy. How will we really know that? Because, he can cry attorney-client privilege, and I don't know, he can be a little nebulous. So how would we actually know what really happened?
Joel, in my view, this is very Shakespeare. Much ado about nothing. So he's subpoenaed and he says lawyer-client privilege. Fine. Question after question, lawyer-client privilege is the answer. So what is the jury here? They hear him testifying saying, uh-oh, we got a problem. So this to me was an absolute waste of time in terms of whether he does or does not come to court, whether he does or does not pay attention to a subpoena. It's just not a big deal because he's testifying by not testifying.
Now that Daryl said it's much ado about nothing, let's play the second soundbite. This is now the lawyer himself, David Oscar Marcus, reacting to what Alex Morris said at the request of Judge Everett. He's on a Zoom call. Let's listen to this. And then, by the way, send me your triple Qs, questions for this panel. I'm going to open it up to these great guests. Whatever you want to ask them. We are, I think, T-minus 5 days to jury selection. So these are really bright minds. We'll open it up, ask them what you want. We'll get through the 5 biggest things to look for ahead of this trial, in their opinion. Here we go.
The call to Detective Ison. So I guess I just don't understand how the state putting in this evidence is relevant, and therefore the underlying evidence in my response to it, I think, should be suppressed. The idea that on the morning that Katie McBaniel was arrested, I learned of that arrest and called the detective to find out if Charlie Adelson was being arrested. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what any good lawyer would do. The defense is right that I would respond to any nefarious suggestion by the state that there's nothing wrong with me calling the detective to find out if Charlie was being arrested that morning. But I guess my response would be, I don't think that initial evidence should be able to come in that I made a phone call to the detective to inquire about Charlie. Certainly that has nothing to do with Donna Adelson. And even if this was a trial about Charlie Adelson, I don't think it would be relevant, Your Honor. I was trying to find out whether the detective that morning was going to arrest Charlie. Nothing wrong, nothing untoward or abnormal about me calling the detective to inquire about that. So I would ask that whole little snippet be excluded.
So this is an interesting point that he raises, Joe Patuto, because we forget he's Charlie's attorney, but it's Donna that's about to be on trial. So he's basically, a third party, if not a fourth party. What do you think of his argument? By the way, he's considered one of the best attorneys in the country, as far as I know. Harvard, went to Harvard, heard of Harvard. But what do you think of his counter to that? Is he just smooth at lawyering?
I think it's interesting that he's talking about relevance and raising whether it's admissible against Donna. I mean, he just really doesn't want to be there. And so he'll raise the claim of anybody if he can stay away. I actually, since I didn't hear this as well this morning, it was interesting that he said he, quote unquote, I learned it rather than so-and-so told me. And that may be important, or at least buttress the state's claim that this is a conspiracy going on. But he just, I mean, I would define him as, I want to stay home, and anything I can do to stay home, I'm going to do and say.
But Joe, is that because he doesn't want to get on a flight to Atlanta and then divert to Tallahassee, since somehow unbelievably there's no direct flights? Or is it because he's worried about legal repercussions?
Well, he doesn't have to answer anything that affects the privilege, the lawyer-client privilege that he has with Charlie. In fact, the judge made it clear this morning. He told all the lawyers you can't go near that. So that worry should be off the table for him. Now, I'm not, I don't want to question, certainly any lawyer who's worth his salt is going to worry about the privilege and worry about the fact that he maintains the privilege, no question. But I don't think that's an issue. I think he just doesn't want to be there.
Tim Jansen, your thoughts? And again, I mean, the interesting thing here, again, he was Charlie's attorney. This is a trial for Donna. So how do you link? I mean, it's the defense too that wants him to come out. But how do you link Charlie to Donna to Katie? It starts to become an interesting match to, a thread, a needle to try to thread, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, his argument was not that it was privileged communication, because it wasn't. His argument is that it's not relevant and it's inadmissible. And more importantly, I don't want to come to Tallahassee and testify under oath about this stupid issue. It's dumb. And judge, the defense lawyer and the state's not backing me, but I'm going to make my own arguments. And once you rule, I'm going to keep arguing that I shouldn't have to come. I mean, it was interesting. He became the lawyer. He's arguing his own motion. So he doesn't want to come. And I think Daryl will tell you, I think no lawyer wants to testify in a courtroom. We do not want to be under oath answering questions. That's not what we do for a living. We ask the questions.
I actually testified for 8 hours in a murder case many, many years ago. And I actually had a good time because the assistant DA was one of my best friends, and he was doing everything he could not to put me in harm's way, but he had no choice, and he didn't like my testimony. But can you imagine, he comes to court. One of the questions is, excuse me, are you aware of Mrs. Adelson's one-way ticket to Vietnam? I can't answer that on the basis of lawyer-client privilege. Oh, okay. What is the jury here?
Guilty.
That's my theatrics in the court.
That's interesting. Ida Shaw JD here, who is obviously a JD. Back to Joe. My suspicious mind cannot accept that there's no hidden agenda in the defense seeking Charlie Adelson's former lawyer's appearance. Could there be an undisclosed motive that we just don't know about, Joe?
I suppose anything's possible. I don't know that I can think of one. Well, I'll stop with there. I can't think of an undisclosed motive that would bring in the first lawyer that Charlie had. Maybe somebody else on this panel is more creative.
Daryl, the wife's let me know. We got a little crack on the audio. We're going to try to fix it if we can on our end, but all is well for the time being. I will let you know. Tim, there's two other kind of prongs to this motion, as attorneys like to say. I'm learning all the lingo as I go. The other one is legal fees. And they even say that the FBI visited David Oscar Marcus at his office. I mean, does David Oscar Marcus have anything to be concerned about here in any way?
Legal fees are not protected. They're not privileged. Lawyers don't usually talk about them. We don't discuss them out of professionalism. But if you can get subpoenaed and they can request your attorney's fees, they can request who's paying your legal fees. I think Marcus did. He responded to the FBI and told him. Remember, there was a Nevia hearing by Judge Hankinson about the fees for Magbonawa's lawyers. And Judge Hankinson, who was about as conservative and law enforcement as there is, he was satisfied that there was not a problem with the legal fees. I think this is much to do about nothing. I think they should have tried to get a stipulation with the prosecution. The judge probably should have said, can't you just work this out instead of having me deal with this issue? But they didn't.
Look at this. Daryl Cohen fans far and wide, but this is right near him, Cobb County, Georgia. The final thing here in this motion, and then we're just going to open it up to question after question, and we'll get the 5 biggest things that these guests are looking out for in no particular order once we're done. Sadiq Farouk coming back into the chat from Nigeria. I'll say hello to him every time. As long as Nigeria is in the house. I love the international aspect of STS. The final here thing, there's a text message, Daryl, between David Oscar Marcus and Charlie Adelson that the lawyer bumps into Katie Magbanwa. By the way, her name is Magbanwa. That's how you pronounce it. And he bumps into her at the office, his office, because his office is right next to her attorney's office in the same building. But I've got some sources telling me that he moved into that office basically when a lot of this stuff started to go down. Anything odd about that to you?
I think we're talking convenience, and it's very interesting when conveniently someone is next to another person, lawyer and lawyer, when there's a major case going on. So is it odd? No. Is it contrived? Absolutely. Do I believe that it was done intentionally? I do. But does it really matter? Not really. I don't think. We'll see.
By the way, you just heard a little while ago, I thought it was interesting. Daryl Cohen doesn't even know he said it, but he said he testified for 8 hours, and his buddy was the prosecutor who said he'd take it easy on him. So there's some inside baseball going on. These lawyers all know each other, and I hope everything stays kosher is all I can say. But it's the way of the world, and I'm sure Daryl would never, ever do something unkosher, ever. But there's an interesting question off the beaten path from what we're talking about now from Abby Crossing. More than a friend of the show. I don't know how I would describe her. Other than that, she helps us out a lot. Tim, do you know if state's witnesses are re-entering trial prep with the DA's office before trial, or do they go in cold? Excellent question.
Well, trials are like Broadway shows, right? You have rehearsals, you have scripts, you have costumes. I imagine these witnesses not only are testifying or being interviewed, they're going to be given the transcript of their previous testimony so they can make sure they reiterate the exact same thing. And they're given to it, and they're allowed to look at it and allowed to review it. But trust me, this hearing you saw today, Chris Corbett They prepped for that hearing for 3 days. He knew every question, every answer, every document that Sarah was going to show him. If you're not preparing your witnesses, then you're just not prepared and you're not going to win.
Wow. 3 days they prepared for that? That's
I'm
unbelievable.
sure going through the whole summary of 319 exhibits and paring it down and getting his talking points.
Wow, that's I would never have thought that ever. Missy Cohen, who is not related to Daryl Cohen, as far as I know, and this will go to Joe Patuto. Donna's drop call with Charlie. This is the so-called hot mic call that is admissible. The lady in the background talking to Donna about Vietnam and Wendy, has she been subpoenaed? Is she a lawyer? We don't know her name. I don't know. Joe, do you know anything more than we
I
know?
have no idea. I don't know if she's been subpoenaed. I don't know if she's a lawyer. I don't know that she has anything much to add because you have Donna speaking and saying everything that's incriminating and everything that makes her look bad by herself. I don't know why you want to gild the lily by bringing in somebody else who can say what you can hear. Yes or no. So, but I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
I love expressions like gild the lily. Love that.
I
I'm
don't
so
think I've
tired.
ever heard that before.
Yeah, because you haven't had a law professor on your podcast before.
No.
I'm so tired. That's me. By the way, I didn't really eat today, so if you see me collapsing onto my desk, just continue the show. Go about your business. Don't mind me. Daryl just had a big dinner. He's laughing at me. Donna Adelson. By the way, Daryl Cohen, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I've said this before, but when I was in Atlanta, the guy drove like 75 hours across Atlanta to come see me. A man of his word. I love it.
No, I went to see your mom.
Yeah. Good point. Who, by the way,
And by the way, Joel, what I didn't mention is the day after I testified, walking back into the courthouse, I was walking in next to the judge who was presiding, and he wouldn't look at me, but he said, and I quote, this was many years ago, "If I ever need a witness, I want you, Daryl." And then we kept walking. Yeah, I'm going to have to leave in a second. I really apologize. I'll try to jump back on.
Okay, Ed, don't worry about it. I'm going to let you go. Have a great night, Daryl.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
See you,
Bye.
Daryl.
All right, bye-bye. Daryl's like legendary. Comes and goes, always on the go. COE and Steve, no more cell phone on the go guests because we are professional here. We've stepped up our game. None of that. Oh, here we go. I'm so tired. DA will sink herself by taking the stand. That would be Donna Adelson. Narcissists tend to blather on endlessly. Tim Jansen, have you found this to be true? Is she going to talk herself into a conviction?
Well, we have a saying in our business, and usually when you talk to the police, you're not talking yourself out of arrest, you're talking yourself into a conviction. And that normally happens before they get arrested. Donna's going to be a lot more clever and circumspect than you think. And I think she'll do better. She saw how badly Charlie did. They have a dress rehearsal. I don't think she's going to come off as scripted as Charlie was. Because I think of a lot of her answers are going to be, I don't know. I was only relying on what Charlie was telling me. Charlie only told me so much. You know, I'm limited in my knowledge. I really didn't know much. I'm just protecting my son. That's going to be her answer. But she's going to testify.
By the way, Lisa Burton's asking, is Charlie still going to be at the trial? He's in Tallahassee. COE, I hate to give you work, but I love to do it at the same. It's a love-hate relationship. There is a new mug of Charlie being booked into the Leon County Jail. If you want to pull that up to show everyone, he actually looks pretty decent. Can't tell if he's got his hair like in a little ponytail, but he's got, he's looking all right. Nikki Cuds, friend of the show, gifting 10 surviving the Survivor membership. So let me just, we've got the sound the COE pulled. This is now Judge Everett. We'll call this the Marcus motion. This again is trying to get Charlie's attorney to testify, which Judge Everett did rule in favor of for the defense. This is him speaking, very eloquent. Love this guy. Just the way he says things, his phrases crack me up. Here we go.
Right. As to the first issue of the phone call and whether it goes in any form or fashion to the conspiracy, what I'm going to rule is the following. The state may inquire as to the topic. If the defense has a factual related line of questioning to ask Mr. Marcus, the factual line of questioning will be permitted. Nothing that goes into attorney-client privilege may be inquired to. Is everyone clear on those?
Joe Patuto, he said as long as it deals with a factual line of questioning, which I understand, but I don't understand from a legal standpoint. What does a legal definition of that mean? What does factual line of questioning entail?
I don't know that there's a legal definition. It's what you think it means. You can
Okay.
you can inquire about facts. You can challenge him on the facts, but you can't do anything that intrudes the privilege. So even if it's factual that happened between attorney and client, can't ask about it. But you can ask where you were, what time it was, what did he say, when did it happen, how long was the conversation, was anybody else there? Anything that you can think of that's relevant is going to be factual, unless it invades the privilege.
I knew I felt like I was going to pass out. I got a little fan and it wasn't on. It's 400 degrees in here. So hopefully I'll be resuscitated soon enough. Here's the final ruling on this part from Judge Everett. Let's take a quick listen together, break it down, dissect it, and then we'll bounce into questions and the 5 big things to look out for.
Marcus, is there any argument as to why this is privileged specifically?
No, Your Honor, if I'm asked a privilege question on the stand, of course, I'll just invoke it at that point. I have no problem doing that, Your Honor. Your Honor, if I could just be heard for 1 second. There is, of course, a difference with the state arguing the existence of a conspiracy and crazy conspiracy theories. There is no basis to argue the existence of a conspiracy by my calling the detective to find out whether Charlie Adelson was being arrested that morning. There's just no, they have to at least allege some tie, some basis in fact to argue that there was a conspiracy that would have some relevance in this trial. Your Honor, I was calling to find out from the detective whether he was arresting my client that morning. There's nothing tied to any conspiracy, certainly with Donna Adelson. So it's just a conspiracy theory with no basis in fact, Your Honor.
I fully understand where you're coming from with both your pleading and your position this morning. As a factual issue, did the phone call take place? There is nothing protected concerning that. How that fits into the larger narrative of what may be admissible or not, yet to be determined. The state, they have their fair opportunity to put on their case. If further objection needs to be raised at that time, I will address at the time. But as to the pure factual issue and whether or not you have knowledge on that topic, that does not go to privilege. That is where they will be permitted to inquire. That is where the defense will be permitted to rebut.
Sarah Dugan lounging back, listening to that. Tim Jansen, just break that down in English for us. What was the judge essentially saying right there?
First, he was saying, is there any privilege you want to claim? No. All right. And then he made his arguments. The judge says, well, there's no privilege. Since there's no privilege, it's a factual. I'm going to allow it. And if there's anything else, I'm going to allow. If there's a problem with that, you speak up right now. That is relevant. How the parties use it in summation. And I think the defense knew from the first trial with Charlie that this is what the state was going to do. They were going to introduce this call from ICE and got a call immediately after Katie got arrested. And then Katie didn't want to cooperate. She lawyered up. And it leaves it hanging out there. And it does make it look like the circle is closing on this family conspiracy with these people. And so that's why the defense wants it out. But there's no privilege calling up a police officer and saying, hey, is my client, is he charged? And the timing is important. How he learned, he's probably not going to say that. But the fact that he made a phone call is not a privileged communication.
And Tim, do you think he's going to be an effective witness for the defense since he is this Harvard-trained lawyer?
Well, I know what he's not going to do. He's not going to argue to the judge it's not relevant on the stand. He's going to answer yes, and really short, no, and he's not going to volunteer anything. That's all. You're probably going to get a yes and a no. And I don't recall. I don't remember.
So he's coming up to Tallahassee. How long is he going to be on that witness stand for?
Less than 15 minutes.
I sort of hope David Oscar Marcus is listening to this. What's up, David? We live in the same town. I'll take you to lunch. I just shot JD, back to Tim on this one. What advice do you have for the witnesses like Ryan Fitzpatrick? Yindra Velasquez was subpoenaed, but she's not testifying, but Ryan is. What advice do you have for them if they may be doing podcasts like STS ahead? It's a little late now, but what advice do you have for them?
Well, you know that Dan has probably watched all of his statements, his comments on the air, and I'm sure he'll try to impeach him if he said anything that shows he's less or can prove he's less than an objective witness, that has a negative feeling against the Adelsons, which I think he did. Didn't he say that Charlie owed him a bunch of money and threatened him? Mm-hmm. So there's not a lot of love there, but you know, it's never good for a witness to be going on air publicly talking about a case that they may be testifying under oath. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, there's definitely no love lost between Ryan Fitzpatrick and Charlie Adelson. And by the way, Ryan said he
knows the mother too, right? He knows Donna. He's been to the house.
Donna. Yeah, I think he's met Donna. Yeah, so he's gonna be able to testify, I guess, to her character to some extent. But he said he's going to use the phrase the kids use these days, scorched earth, at this trial. He's just telling it as it is. He did that last time, so I don't know what he can add to it, but we'll see. This is a very interesting question from Southern Mom. Joe Pachuto, before we get there, I want to incorporate 5 big things ahead of Donna Adelson's trial. It could be however you interpret that. What is one big thing ahead of Donna's
I'm going to leave to Tim the one that I'm guessing he would like to do, which is the recording of the information with regard to Dan Markel was killed in a drug deal. I'll leave that one to you. This is my generosity. I'm going to say the information that Tim had about Donna trying on clothes and thinking about getting her hair dyed. And the reason is, I think it may suggest what she is going to portray on the stand. I have been thinking all along, I think most of us, that she's going to come in as a poor little old granny. But if she really wants to dye her hair and she's trying on clothes, maybe she's trying on, granny clothes. And I don't know what you would do to dye your hair. It's already gray in 2 colors. But it suggests to me that maybe we're wrong and she's going to come in coiffed and well-dressed for this. So that's mine.
That's actually fascinating to me that you would pick that. And I think this is going to be the most anticipated wardrobe appearance of pretty much anyone since maybe Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl. I don't know.
Or Wendy wearing the same outfit twice.
Exactly. Or Wendy wearing the same outfit twice. This is an interesting question here. Look at this. Daryl Cohen is back, I think. Can't get rid of Daryl. Let me see hang on one sec. Daryl, you back?
I'm back.
You're back. All right. Get yourself stable and we'll bounce you right back. Oh, there you go. You're pretty stable there, Daryl. Southern Mom, this is an interesting question, Joe. Any idea why Attorney Marcus did not represent Charlie during his trial? This is a very, very interesting question. By the way, shout out again to Mentor Lawyer. He did something interesting. He basically dissected this whole motion at Deep Dive True Crime. And one of the things that Mentor Lawyer mentions in that video, it's about a 35-minute video worth watching, again, on Mentor Lawyer's channel, Deep Dive True Crime. One of the things he mentions is there a possibility that Charlie changed his story? Like he had one story that he told David Oscar Marcus, maybe didn't love it, and then switched it to this double extortion theory. So in good faith, ethically, David Oscar Marcus couldn't defend him because he knew he was essentially lying. Is that a possibility?
I suppose it's a possibility. I would have guessed that, clients try to hire the lawyer they think are going to do the best job. And for reasons, well, I won't say anything. And the Adelsons think Rashbaum is it. So I wouldn't have inferred from the fact of the change in lawyers that it was the lawyer that walked away as compared to the client going somewhere. And there's a little hint of that in his motion to quash, where he makes sure to say they hired this other lawyer and he was convicted. So there's a hint there about it.
Yeah. So there. By the way, one of the people was asking if he was throwing shade, Daryl. When this lawyer, David Oscar Marcus, got to say it again, Harvard Law, did he throw shade at Dan Rashbaum? Because he's like, look, he didn't hire me to represent him at this trial, and the guy he did basically blew it. Was that throwing shade at Dan Rashbaum?
I think I should not comment on the grounds that he may very well have been happening. In other words, I don't want to say this is public. This is in the public, and the four of us are not the only four watching this. So, look, this was not a good look on his part, in my view. I don't know that it matters what the theory of defense was, because as long as his client doesn't testify, and if you don't bring any witnesses, theories can be theories, and it doesn't make any difference. So it's interesting. That's all.
Yeah. Daryl, I hate to say this to you, but your audio is crackling like crazy. I'm going to bounce you out, and if the COE can fix it, she will. If not, you're a gentleman and a scholar, as my mother would say.
Neither, but thank you.
Yeah.
You know, Joel, the other reason could have been that David's fee was much higher than Dan's, and the family did not want to spend the money, that kind of money, for the representation, and they got Dan.
What do you think the difference is? I'm curious in this.
I would guess $2 million for Marcus, maybe $750,000 for Dan.
Wow, it's a good gig if you can get it. Here to Joe Patuto, just going through the question. By the way, Tim, before we ask this question of Joe, Tim Jansen, what's one big thing? She talked about this text message. What's one big thing ahead of Donna's trial? This text message is unbelievable. Basically, suggesting between Donna and Charlie, almost like an alibi, that Dan was trying to buy cocaine, and it was a deal gone bad.
Yeah. Do we have the exact date that was done? Wasn't that? Yeah.
I got. What was the question?
I believe that this undercuts the whole double extortion theory, because if you listen to Charlie's first trial, he says that on the night of the murder, Catherine Magbonawa comes to the house and tells her these people have killed him and you owe us money. And that's why he the next day gave this money. Well, and then he told his mother. So if that is true, then why are they talking about them killing him because it was a bad drug deal, right? And that Danny uses drugs. We know that's not true. If they were told about this double extortion, they were being extorted. Exactly. It clearly undercuts their entire defense. And they have to know now that the gig is up, that the government found this email that was probably not relevant before, but now it's really relevant to Donna's case, and it's going to hurt the defense.
Hey, Tim, that's my question too. Do you think they had this text flagged for Donna's trial and just didn't use it before?
Well, they probably didn't need it for Charlie's trial because they didn't know about the double extortion until the opening statement. And then they went back and then they found this. Say, wait, look at this. Look at this. They're saying this, but they said they found out about the extortion and murder. Well, why would they say this back then? Well, we know why, because that double extortion was made up later, prior to trial and after this so-called email.
Joe, anything to add to that? I mean, how damning is that singular text message if they go with the double extortion theory, which people assume that they are, because as Tim suggested, they would have known, according to Charlie's story, about the double extortion prior to this text message. So it makes no sense.
I agree with Tim. It's very damning because it undercuts what was a silly theory to begin with. Now you've got a silly theory that apparently they didn't even adhere to. So yeah, no, I think it's it's only one conversation, but it's pretty important, I think.
Tim, I got just a random question, because if I'm sitting on the jury, everyone's in trouble, because I'm a little slower, I think, than the average person. How did jurors absorb all this information and come out with the right verdicts? Because these lawyers, as I'm literally finding out, are playing literally 3 to 4 to 5D chess and they're lawyering hard. How did jurors, I don't know, understand everything unfolding in front of them and know how to come back with a verdict? It seems very difficult, actually, very
So
complicated.
remember, this is a Broadway show. And
Mm.
remember what the prosecution has to do. Prosecution has to get their witnesses on in a simple fashion, reiterate what happened, and reiterate how they proved it. The defense gets up there and they want to muddy everything, right? They throw this up, they throw that down. They try to, in any way they can, question and leave something hanging. It's the prosecution's job to make sure there's nothing hanging. Everything they said is fine. Here's the evidence. And jurors are much better than you think because they're sitting in a courtroom they're not used to. Some of them may have been jurors before, but they watch and they listen to everything that happens. They're like the audience in a play, in a show, right? They're watching every actor. They're listening to the scripts. They're looking at the props, and they realize when they get collectively together, they're going to get it all together and come up with a decision. And they take their job seriously. They really do. And especially a high profile case, they want to get it right.
Can I add something to that, Joel?
Please.
Because I think Tim is absolutely correct, but it's why opening statements are so important,
Mhm.
because the opening statement collects all the evidence in a coherent fashion for the jury to follow. It gives them a roadmap on the basis of which they can evaluate the evidence that comes in. So they're not left with hearing evidence willy-nilly and trying themselves to figure out how to go together.
What's
and I-
interesting, yeah, we covered the Michelle Troconis trial in Connecticut, and I remember for some reason Connecticut has no opening statements. They just get right into the testimony. How many states are like that, Joe? Are there a lot of states like that?
I didn't know there were any. So that
Yeah.
that trial surprised me because it really is critically important that you get your story told to the jury. And if you can get the jury to buy into your story, you're more than I think halfway home.
Yeah,
But
I
Joe,
mean, it was,
Joe, you know that the trial starts in jury selection, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Actually,
Absolutely.
the trial starts when they see your defendant and they see you, and then jury selection. That's where you start your opening. And if you're really good and clever, you know your defense, you ask questions, you wait for a juror to open the door so that you can throw out your point you want to make to the whole panel, right? And then you carry that through to your opening. And then now, by the time the first witness calls, that jury knows exactly what your defense is going to be, where it's coming, and they're looking for it. And when they see it, they remember it.
I have a
that's a really
question
great
for
point.
you, Tim, if I might. What do you think about Roshbaum letting what's the other lawyer's name here?
Alex Morris.
Do
Alex
not just the voir dire, but also the opening statement before he gets up and tries to establish any sort of rapport with the jury.
I can tell you that my sources, and I broke this afternoon, that Alex is picking the jury and Alex is doing the opening.
Right. And so
And that
You
was the
think-
problem they had the last time. They brought
No.
the jury. I've never heard any criminal defense lawyer ever say they would let a jury consultant come into that and then leave and then throw the lawyer that has no rapport with do the opening. That was ineffective.
That's interesting. Because I don't know. I mean, can that be brought up in some sort of appellate issue, Tim?
No, because the client waived it, and I believe that they got permission from the judge, and Charlie approved it. It's what you call a trial tactic decision, and those are not going to be overturned because lawyers have to make those decisions during trials.
Tim, take us in, because I don't think most people know this really intimately, including myself. First day of jury selection, how does it go down? I mean, they've got a pool of X number, 200 jurors. How do they start to separate? When do they get them into, a smaller group, et cetera, et cetera?
So when I was in the jury panel for Meg Bonawa, I think they did the same thing with Charlie. All the jurors come into that big courtroom. They might have 200, 250 for the first day. And then the lawyers are in chambers with the judge and a court reporter and the defendant. Was the defendant in there? No, the defendant was not in there when I went in. But they go in there and ask them questions. What have you heard about the case? What media have you heard about the case? Do you have any kind of problem? You can't be here for 2 weeks. Do you know any other participants? Because they want to get that taint outside of the whole jury panel. Because if you say, yeah, I read it, I know she's guilty, is you know what, then that taints everybody. So first, they're going to weed out the ones that clearly can't serve because of time, can't serve because they're not fair, or they talked about the case or they're related. Those are weeded out. The others will come back for round 2, and they will do that. And then the second day, they'll start putting them in a box. And that's where you'll see the jury selection publicly by the lawyers.
Tim, what is the number one question you would want to ask potential jurors?
Depends where I'm sitting. You know what to say? Where you stand depends where you sit. You know, of course, the defense wants to know if anybody that has heard about the case, and there's probably not going to be too many people. And the prosecution, they also want to know about law enforcement, right? The defense really doesn't want anybody on law enforcement on the jury. They just don't, because I think they know law enforcement will see right through this defense. And the prosecution just wants people who aren't going to be anti-police, anti-government. They believe that they got enough evidence. If you're fair and not so anti-government, you can be a good juror as long as you're not related to the defendant.
Joe, anything to add to that in picking jurors here?
Well, I think on the prosecution side, I would want to avoid anybody. I don't want to disparage engineers, but anybody who is so specific and picky, so that you risk them losing particularly in a circumstantial case, you risk them losing the big picture because they're so invested in a little hole that wasn't closed by the prosecution.
Right.
I've heard that many times now. Engineers make very bad jurors.
Hey, Joe, I want to, I have a hard time. I always hear listeners and lawyers talk about, they say it's a circumstantial case. It's only circumstantial evidence. I have found that circumstantial evidence cases are much stronger than eyewitness testimony, which is really flawed. And most of the death penalty cases overturned were based solely on eyewitness testimony, and DNA, got them off.
Yeah,
I agree with you. And I think we need to find a way to erase this notion that circumstantial evidence is somehow not as good as direct evidence. I think a circumstantial case is depending on the evidence you have, can be a great case.
By the way, we're putting out some cool new videos. Please follow us on Instagram at Surviving the Survivor, Twitter, Podcast STS. We have a Facebook page, Surviving the Survivor, and the list goes on. Everyone's got to have 49 different social media channels, but check it out. Rachel, this question kind of fascinates me. This goes to the professor. Is there a time where there's another case that the lawyers / judges can look back on to make rulings? How do they decide this will be the trial that we will allow this? And today, Judge Stephen Everett cited some previous case law. I have a bigger question. How does a judge know what the hell he's doing or she's doing? How do you learn to be a judge? You go to law school, but I think there is judge
You don't
school,
learn
right?
to be a judge at law school.
No.
Yeah.
You learn to be a judge by your practice experience first. And then you learn, a lot of them have baby judges school that they can go to. But mainly it's your practice experience and then your experience on the bench. You don't get to be a great judge the first time you hear a case. Your experience gets you there. How they know what the law is, they depend on the lawyers to bring it forward by and large. They may have a law clerk that will help, but the theory is it's my client. I'm going to do my best job of marshaling the facts and giving you the relevant law, and so will the other side.
By the way, I just scrolled because I'm always 100 billion chats behind you, but I'm now at the bottom of the chat. So please put your question with a triple Q back in the chat, and I'm coming for it now. Tim, give me another big thing that you're looking for. 5 big things. We have 1 so far. What's another big thing you're looking for ahead of this trial?
Before I do that, I have to ask, Professor, I see this in court all the time. Lawyers go up and they do their case. They mention their case and it's done. and they said, "Judge, may I be excused?" It kills me. You have one case. Why are you asking the judge to be excused? Do they teach that in law school? Because it's not really proper.
You know they don't teach that in law school. No, they don't.
But they say it all the time, and it looks like they're just trying to garner favor with the judge.
You know, teaching is interactive. I can teach, it doesn't mean you're going to learn.
That's right.
Annie K. To Tim Jansen, who is the criminal defense attorney here. Can the panel, Tim, please speak to Dan? We're talking Rashbaum here. His attitude, behavior in court, how it might affect jurors. Interesting question, because a lot of people, I mean, look, SCS Nation is the jury pool, right? And everyone in here is saying Rash is kind of, he can, Dan, I like you, but people in here are saying he can be grading, whereas Alex Morris is much more kind of low key. How big a deal is this? And by the way, you got to give me another thing.
Yeah. Let me think about that. Well, you know, you are who you are, right? You're a trial lawyer. You learn. You say, how do judges learn? They learn by judging and watching other judges. How do criminal defense lawyers become good defense lawyers? You watch other lawyers. You watch older lawyers. You watch trials. You pick up things that are good and things that are bad. But the problem is some people think they're so smart and they're so great, they don't think they need to learn from anyone else. And they think their behavior is normal and appropriate. And so while Dan probably thinks he's being very respectful to the judge, but when you look at it from the outside, he's probably not as deferential as he should be. He probably is not going to get the close calls because of that behavior. And it just doesn't look great. Now, that might work in Miami, Florida. It's not going to work in Tallahassee, Florida, not with this judge. This judge, I think, has a background as a public defender. So he's been on both sides, which usually makes him a really good judge because they're not skewed one way or the other. Normally, you get judges who are prosecutors. They go right to the bench, and you know all the time they're ruling against you. And if it's a 50-50 tie, the prosecution's going to win the motion. And you see that a lot. But I don't know if Dan's behavior is any different than he treats the judges in Miami, but I know it's different than the other lawyers. You know, DeCoste had the same problem, right? There was no love lost between Judge Hankinson and DeCoste. And in fact, I think he would have put him in contempt and held him in jail if he could have, because of the disrespect that he gave Judge Hankinson.
By the way, Oz says, Tim is a national asset. Thanks, mate, for your continued outstanding contribution to STS Nation. I'm trying to get Tim on as many nights as he wants to do the show, especially since I'm going to be trying to do it from his office. But Tim is a mainstay here for this case. And right on cue, the COE, I have that question queued up, and she bounces right off it. Joe Patuto, give me another big thing. I think you've each given one. What's another big thing ahead of this trial that you're looking for?
So Tim gets to punt, and I get the question. Is that how this goes?
Exactly.
I'll come up with a big thing.
Yeah, just one big thing.
Yeah, I think it's the one that Dan said was the only piece of evidence against Donna, and that's the evidence of Donna being outside the house, and Dan responds 10 minutes. And that's the night the night of the murder. Katie is there, and Katie says that Charlie told her that Donna had just left, and that's when the money drop off is. And you know, that's one of the places where, with what the statements and the evidence shows, that Donna is directly involved. So I think that's a real big one. So I agree with Dan.
Yeah,
That's a big thing. I think the testimony of Wendy, when she's got to testify against her mother, not her sibling, but now she's testifying against her mother. Is she going to be as cocky as she was in the last two trials? Is she going to laugh and make comments that are inappropriate? And is she going to try to skew her testimony, knowing that her testimony is going to hurt her mother? That's going to be interesting to me, because testifying against your sibling is one thing, but testifying against your mother, and the mother has insinuated that everybody's taken care of Wendy all her life. And she, you know, that's going to be interesting to me.
By the way, this is why it's called Surviving the Survivor. I'm 55 years old. Do not say again that you were tired and you did not eat. All caps from my mother. Issues run deep in many families. I've been emasculated publicly by my mother many times, including right now. I've even got Tommy Scoville in the chat, who runs Lifeboat for Sobriety. He's a former inmate watching my mother excoriate me on national YouTube. It just never ends. But I did get comfort the other day. Took my mom to see a journalist. And I said to her, do you think Howard Stern, who's like at least 10 years, more than 10 years older than me, he's probably about 70. Both his parents are still alive. And I asked my mother, I said, do you think Howard Stern's mother still yells at him, even though the guy's worth close to probably $600-700 million? My mother, without missing a beat, said, absolutely, she yells at him every day about something.
It's true.
Yeah, it's a price you pay being a son, I guess. There you go. Joe, I remember the other question. It was a great question. How long does this motion involving what we believe to be involving Rob Adelson, it's a sealed motion. How long does it stay sealed? How do we find out what it's all about? When do we find out, if ever?
Well, if he testifies, we'll know. If he doesn't testify, I'm not sure I have a good answer to that, because I don't know why it was that they had the private hearing on it and why it was sealed. And since I don't know that, it's hard to answer whether it will ever be unsealed, whether we will ever know the answer to it. The easy part of it, if he testifies, we'll know.
Yeah, I think the judge is probably waiting to see other evidence come in to determine the relevance. If it's relevant, then we'll address the issue of whether it's the probative value outweighs the prejudicial effect. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. Tim Jansen, by the way, I hate to put you on the spot. A lot of people keep asking about, I know Dateline's going to have a producer there, and 2020 is doing another show. Do you know when the next 2020 is by any chance?
I do. I filmed a show yesterday, and it's going to be after the trial. And their biggest question was, will Jason Newland or George N.M. be willing to testify after this trial? And I said, well, that'll give you a view of whether any more charges are coming, because if they say no, or if they say yes, then, you know, that's a clue, right? But they're going to do it. 2020 is doing it after the trial.
Yeah. By the way, Tallahassee is an unbelievable place. The people are literally, I told you, someone sent me a Knowles jersey that I'm going to sport. But someone else today, part of SDS Nation, literally donated some lunch money for STS for the trial. Thought that was like one of the nicest things. COE, I don't have the name, unfortunately. I know you do. So if you want to put it up, we'll give them a shout out. And I'll be giving them a shout out during our lunch lives, because they're donating lunch. How kind. I don't even know if they live in Tallahassee, to be honest, but I do know that they live part of the year near me. So there you go. Tim Jansen, is Donna dreading the fact that Robert Adelson could be on the stand? I mean, if you're her, that guy's got some goods on the, he's family. How dangerous is that for Donna?
Well, pretty dangerous. They filed a motion in limine under seal. You would think that they're going to elicit his testimony that Donna was a control freak. Donna controlled everybody's life, controlled Charlie's life, controlled Wendy's life. And she tried to control mine. And when I fell in love with someone that wasn't Jewish, married an Indian, I was disavowed by the family. That's the kind of control Donna has. Now, is that relevant? Well, you go back to the motive, and Donna wants her grandkids and her daughter back, and she's that controlling. It certainly opens a door to a motive.
Just looking at a comment here. Harold Anything But Dull is very insightful member STS Nation. This is for the professor. When was the first check written from Donna to Katie Magbanwa? Very important, because that is when Charlie testified that he told Donna of the double extortion. What do you make of this comment, Professor?
Yeah, I don't know the exact date, but it was somewhere, I believe, close to the time of the murder, because he starts providing, I think, money and other things to Katie relatively soon after that.
What about this one? Propo. That's your new name, Propo. Professor Patuto.
I like it.
Propo. I just came up with it. Propo.
It's hard to say though.
It is hard, so you can't say it 10 times, but I can say it once. So, Propo, do you think Katie may expand her testimony against the Adelsons this time, assuming she takes a stand and she is in Tallahassee? Does she give up more about what happened than in previous trials?
Boy, that's a real double-edged sword. Yeah, she was easy to impeach, although probably at the end of the day, not successfully in the last trial. And so if she comes in with more information, that's an easy one for the defense to go after. You don't typically remember more things as years go by as compared to early on. And I don't know what explanation she'd give as to why it was that it took this long. I mean, did she see a hypnotist? I mean, it seems to me that's very difficult. Maybe she does know something more. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say she said everything that she knows, but boy, I don't know. I don't know whether she would or she wouldn't, whether the state would try to elicit more.
So, Joe, one time in a federal trial, the witness for the government to a question said, "Let me recreate my memory." Said that in front of the jury to something that had occurred 5 years earlier. Let me recreate. And I objected, Judge. The witness shouldn't be recreating her memory.
Wow.
And I could never forget that phrase.
Yeah. That's Tim. I was just going to ask you something about that. By the way, if people think that the Carm thing is shtick, I'm going to try to record her after the show because she's going to beat me up. I told you, don't ever say you're tired. Blah, 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 blah. She'll start hammering me, especially because she doesn't feel well. I say the same thing to my 13-year-old son. This does not give me hope. Rose, one of my favorite names because my beloved puggle of 17 years, Mabel Rose. You're in for a long life, I hope, and enjoy it. It's never going to go. Tim, your girls seem like so sweet. Like they're never are they ever in trouble, Tim?
No, they are not in trouble. Thank God. And it's probably because of my wife.
Yeah,
and I probably scared the heck out of them. And I was the go-to lawyer for their friends.
Yeah. They're like the sweetest, nicest people you ever meet.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. This one, Tim, too, as I start to fade. Another big thing, Tim, just throw me another big thing before we answer this question.
Well, I said from the beginning, I'm doing an article. It's coming out in the paper on Sunday. I said, why is this trial important? And I finished the one paragraph. Why it's important is because the state believes that Donna was the reason this crime was committed. And she believed she could commit this crime and shield herself by not being directly involved, by using others, and thought she could get away with it. And while there's not going to be any direct evidence, the state has to, at the very beginning all the way through, convince that jury that circumstantial evidence is sufficient. And there's a jury instruction right on point that says the law makes no difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. So the state has to really hone on that from the beginning to the end. And we'll see how they do.
Well put. From Oz, Sarah Dugan, Tim, has not missed a step. You know her.
I do.
She's basically George's right-hand woman. Do we envision her taking on a bigger role in Donna Adelson's trial? We've seen her quite a bit during these motion hearings. Sarah Dugan ain't playing, says Ritz. What do you think? You think we're going to see more of her? She going to do the openings? I think she did them for Charlie, right?
I saw Sarah do her first trial, and I've seen her grow into a very good prosecutor. Jurors love her. People love her. She's a very lovable person, a very believable person. She's very organized. She's prepared, and she comes across credible. Those are all good traits for an attorney, especially for a prosecutor. Now, I wouldn't say she's Georgia's second fiddle. Sarah's done a lot of trials and has won a lot of trials. So they're a great combination. And I think it's going to work well cross-examining whoever does it, Donna, because you won't have some male beating up this little old lady. So you're going to have a female. And you saw how effective Sarah was cross-examining Catherine. Very effective. Just a very common questioning, getting good information, and just impeached her so badly. So
I feel like
I don't know who's going to do. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I feel like 15 years from now, you could walk into a smoky bar in Tallahassee. You'll see Sarah in Georgia smoking a cigar, drinking a scotch, talking about how they put away the Adelson family. I mean, they're pretty badass. So I just have that image in my head right now. To pro po, do they have to disprove double extortion? Donna Adelson's defense is she just believed Charlie. Double extortion was already rejected by a jury. Good question. Do they have to disprove it?
They have to prove their case, and to the extent proving their case means to go after some of the silliness in the defense, they will react to it. And I think that's what you saw in Charlie's trial. The defense clearly has to persuade the jury that Donna was taken in by her son, and I think that's going to be a high hill to climb. Certainly, if she acts up at all, it's going to be an impossible hill to climb. But even if she manages to hold her own the whole time, I still think it's going to be difficult. And I've heard people say, well, gee, Florida has a lot of senior citizens and they will be sympathetic to her. And I guess I'm not quite so sure that that's going to be the case. I mean, they're going to feel we're sitting, we can make decisions, we're competent, capable adults, and we don't see how you can be so gullible as a sentient adult with what your child is telling you. But they've got it. If they can't persuade the jury that she believed him, then they're out of luck. Now, the state will be proving its case, and in the context of proving its case, it's going to be disproving that theory. But we'll see what happens.
Jopo, were either of your parents either lawyers and or professors?
Oh no, I'm a child of immigrants. Neither of them even finished high school.
Oh wow, that's incredible. That's what makes America great. That's incredible. I won't go on any kind of rant about that. America's a pretty cool place. Look at that. I thought you were going to say your dad, graduated Harvard, MD, PhD, JD, but no, he's an immigrant. And she goes on to become a renowned law professor. Tim, I was just looking at a comment that I scrolled by, but they said they were talking about this text message about, trying to throw Dan under the bus on Tallahassee television today. So it got the attention of local TV. It's interesting to me. Potential jurors are watching TV. How much of how much of an influence does local media think have on this jury pool?
I don't know what TV they're watching. No one really watches the local TV. They don't watch. I mean, they watch the shows, like maybe the FBI shows, but not many are watching the news like at 11 and 6 o'clock at night. So
you know why, Tim? Because they're watching STS. That's why.
Well, that's true too.
It's all about new media. Look at this question. This is for Tim from Brady Star. If defense attorney Alex Morris does jury selection and the opening, where does the jury get the perception of Rashbaum? Pro Joe asked this. No answer from Tim. Ask Tim, please. I do as I'm told. Tim, it's a great question. If he's not involved in the jury selection, if he's kind of just a wallflower there, how does the jury get to know him?
Well, they're going to get to know him because he's probably going to do the direct examination of Donna. He's probably going to do the cross-examination of most of the government or the state witnesses. And then he's going to do the closing because remember, Dan said he's the closer. And that's where they're going to build it. They need momentum. And it looks like Daniel's going to give up a little more because I think that Alex is going to do some witnesses in the trial. But it's curious to see what witnesses Dan does. But what you don't want to do is start out badly, right? What they say in a golf tournament on Thursday, you don't win the tournament on Thursday, but you can sure lose it on Thursday. You don't win the trial in the opening, but you can sure lose the jury in opening. So
I love
think
when I love when you give us these tidbits, Tim. I was going to ask you earlier. You just reminded me. You know, you really become a judge. A lawyer. You become anything good while you're doing it. No offense to Joe Poe, but school can only teach you so much. You got to have a base, of course. But what's something that either another attorney or a judge or someone told you once as a young lawyer that you remember to this day? I'll tell you mine, which was the president of NBC News said that the biggest mistakes are the smallest mistakes. And I've talked about this before. You could interview the president of the United States, but if you get his name spelled wrong on the TV set, no one's paying attention to the interview. Curious what a lawyer has told you that you have remembered to this day.
I remember this, and I tell the young lawyers that work for me, listen, if we're winning the motion and the judge has ruled, pick up your stuff and leave. If you lost the motion, keep arguing until the judge changes his mind. Once the judge rules, just pick up and leave, because the judge is not changing his mind. If the other party's not there, get up and leave. And if you're losing, like today, the lawyer in South Florida kept arguing his motion because he knows, keep trying to, and that's what I learned. And I teach the lawyers, if you're winning, leave. And if you're losing, keep talking, keep arguing to the judge.
Joe Poe, any sage advice, like a one-liner that you give all your law students before they go out into the real world?
No, not really. Not one sentence anyway.
Who's the biggest current or former attorney that you taught?
You should have given me advance warning on this. I have to think about that some.
Okay. All right. Like an Alan Dershowitz type.
No, he's old. He was not one of my students. He was a law professor long time ago, and still.
Yes. I didn't actually mean that, because I know you're too young to have taught Alan Dershowitz, but he's the lawyer that I feel like, or Garagos. Everyone knows these guys. Where do I go in order to achieve the hairstyle that slays like Joe Poe, Jay Patuto? Do you have an answer for that one, Joe?
Yeah, you go to a beautician and say, "This is what I want."
Good answer.
That works with more things than hairstyles, by the way.
Very logical. Joe, when you come down to Miami, I have to introduce you to my mom. I feel like you two would get along very well. What's one question, Joe, and I'll ask Tim the same thing, that you would ask Donna on cross that you think would get a reaction or trip her up?
Boy, there are so many. Trip her up? I'm gonna have to think about it some. I don't know what I wasn't thinking about what I'd ask on cross. Well, I'll defer to Tim.
Tim Jansen, go into lawyer mode, Tim.
Miss Adelson, I understand from your comments and your sons that you were being extorted and that you found out about the murder. And then instead of calling the police, you had your daughter and your grandchildren move closer to the people that were extorting your son, killed your son-in-law, and put them in danger. And my second question is, after they were arrested, why didn't you come forward and tell the police this story, how you were a victim?
And I can follow up with a third. Why did you let your daughter move to Miami where the murderers were?
Right.
And not Warner?
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Right.
That's so simple but fantastic. Will that question be asked him by George and Sarah?
I think it will be. It probably wasn't that appropriate for Charlie, but it's really appropriate for the grandmother and mother who are protecting their kids.
Tim, take us inside baseball for a moment. We'll go a few more minutes, everybody, maybe 10 more minutes if the guests will allow it.
Thursday night football.
Oh, yeah. Who's playing tonight?
Buffalo and Miami.
Oh, Miami. I should know that. I'm in Miami. Is that game in Miami?
I think it is in Miami. It's raining. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to. Z says you also slay, Daddy. Oh, thanks, Z-Bugs, who's feeling better. She had a little cold. I just completely forgot what I was going to say, so I'm going to try to find a question here. Does anyone know what my train of thought was? I'll figure it out. Did Charlie get the practice of stapled money from Donna? We don't know, but that is certainly quite incriminating for him. So I think that that's a big issue. This is the question for Professor Patuto. This is coming from Sadiq in Nigeria. This is a law professor's question. $2 million, he heard Tim Jansen say, for the defense lawyer. I'm not sure where he's getting the $1,500 cost, but a prosecutor makes a hell of a lot less money. Basically, government workers, you know, why the disparity in this country? We're just a capitalistic society. What's your answer to this for someone in Nigeria?
Yeah, the taxpayers pay the salary of the prosecutors. A defense lawyer can be paid by a rich client. I don't know that any taxpayers, however much we might admire prosecutors and want them to win and want to do everything for them, would be willing to pay $2 million a pop for prosecutors.
Yeah. By the way, my wife and I, the COE, we went to Africa on our honeymoon. It was a trip of a lifetime. And we were in Rwanda, and the COE had like a fake engagement ring. She didn't want to bring the real ring, get lost, get whatever. And the cab driver sees the fake ring and says, what is this? He was asking us. And we said, in America, you know, when you get engaged, you give a ring. And he was like, he just couldn't wrap his head around it. And he said, in this country, I give my wife a goat because they provide food. And I said to myself, holy crap, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. I threatened to return the ring and get the COE a goat. We are a very materialistic society. Imagine, COE, how much money we could have saved on milk all this time if we just had a goat grazing on our backyard. And I have no idea how long a goat lives for, but I would imagine the goat would still be alive, and both Fred and Ethel would have a playmate. What an amazing thing they do in Rwanda. I highly recommend getting your future fiance a goat instead of a ring. Way more practical. Let's throw this to Tim from Jody B. If new evidence comes out against Harvey or Wendy during the trial, and there's a chance it could, do you think they will wait to arrest them until after the trial? Look at Tim shaking his head. Or will they arrest them immediately and sequentially? What if there is a quote unquote news cliche bombshell?
The prosecution is focusing on the case at hand. They got double jeopardy laws prevent them from charging Donna again. They're not going to worry about something else while they got this at hand. Same reason they did Charlie. They got that done. Then they moved on to Donna. They're not going to limit their focus on potentially charging anyone else. They'll take that information, put it away, and if they get enough they feel they're going to do in the future, they will. So no, they're not going to worry about Wendy. Now they might be trying to get some questions and answers from Donna on cross-examination that might give them enough information to implicate Wendy or her husband, Harvey, and that might be something to look out for.
Yeah. Someone just said a mom is a mom from the womb to the tomb. I've never, ever heard that, but that's an amazing expression. Which FSU game? Shout out to Jared Ross. Hopefully Tim's coming with us. I think they're playing Cal at night. So Joe Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just give me one more big thing ahead of this Donna trial that it just could be anything that you're either looking forward to, curious, or are anticipating.
Well, I guess if you say looking forward to, I'm looking forward to how well prepared both the prosecutors will be. I think the work they do, the conceptualization of what they have to prove, getting that evidence in, not running after extraneous things, knowing when they can give up something without losing a part of their case is really remarkable, particularly when it's compared to what Daniel Rashbaum does sometimes. Not really being, in my view, as prepared and as crisply prepared with exhibits, with everything. I mean, today, when he was asking, again, it's just a tiny little example of it, when he was asking about the Jewish holiday and whether they'd have off, and the judge said, well, it's a holiday for the court. I mean, that's sort of not looking, not preparing, not talking to the prosecutors and saying, are you going to introduce this evidence? Can we agree? And just going to the judge and sort of just, I don't want to say vomit, but I just did, just letting it all out there. The contrast is really remarkable. And I really am looking forward to both Georgia and Sarah and how well I know they're going to do putting this case together.
Joe Poe, let me put you on the spot, especially since Dan listens to the show, I think. And I really do like Dan. I think he has a very difficult case, but let's start this way. What grade would you give Georgia and Sarah for the last trial? What grade do you give Dan Rashbaum?
Well, the easy answer to that is they won and he didn't. So, I mean, I think they did a remarkable job. I'd give them an A. It's harder to grade him because he did have a really bad case. And I do think his technical skills and knowing what to ask witnesses, knowing what exhibits he's going to use are really pretty good. But the sort of thinking 3 steps ahead, it's not always clear to me that he is doing that. So I guess I'd give him a C- maybe.
So I tell my kids, Dan, you got to get grades up. Linda Ortiz, when I feel so bad for Dan, gets beat up left and right. He's got a tough job, man. He's got a really tough job.
Does.
And Linda Ortiz here, regarding the first check issued from the Adelson Institute to Katie Magbanwa. The date on the check was September 17th, 2014. So that's right, 2 months, almost
2
to
months,
the day. 2 months almost to the day after the murder. Kara Fry, Tim Jansen, is there a legal reason, and we'll wrap up with closing thoughts, is there a legal reason we never heard Charlie declare his innocence in the jailhouse calls? You would think he would have been devastated he was innocent and that the jury didn't buy it. I mean, case in point, I call Carm after I'm convicted, I'd be sobbing saying, I didn't do this. I did not do this. I'm innocent. You got to help me. He never did that. Why?
Well, he probably didn't believe it. And he probably didn't say it. He said it at times when he needed to say it. Remember when the bailiffs were saying, hey, why didn't you flee? We would have fled. And he goes, oh, because I'm innocent. The thing about trial lawyers, some of the best trial lawyers are the ones that have charisma and are good storytellers. But you have to be organized and you have to know when to pick a fight, where to pick a fight, because then you're going to lose the jury if you come off heavy-handed. So you'll see really good lawyers, good trial lawyers, pick and choose when they're going to fight. Be affable, admit, laugh, get laughter in the trial. It makes you look real and not some lawyer trying to pull a wool over the jury. Because if you don't have the jury, you're not going to get the verdict, right? Yeah. And I mean, the state has to really screw up if they don't like you and they give you a not guilty verdict.
Tim Jansen, Thumper in the chat says, I'm subscribing to the Tallahassee Democrat to only read Tim Jansen's articles. Thank you, Tim, for all you've done. There you go. I've done the same, and I will be reading Tim's articles as well. Jody Arrington, this is like a field trip, Tim, for all these co-defendants. They get to travel and get out of their cells. They're all in Tallahassee, ironically. On a serious note, though, what do you think it's like for them? They're literally back in the Leon County Jail. I don't know, Luis Rivera's there. What do they do with Luis? They got to keep him away from Charlie. How's all that done?
Inmates don't like to move. I had a client, he was being moved. He didn't want to move because he didn't want to lose his didn't want to lose his bunkmate because he was afraid if you're gone long enough, they're going to move somebody else in and you're going to get moved.
Oh, wow.
So sorry about that. Somebody's calling my wife, I think.
Yeah, better you than my mom calling me.
But it's not good for the defendants because, Lewis will probably be fine because Lewis, for whatever he is, he's a hardened criminal. He's going to tell what he knows. And it's easy for him because he's telling the truth, right? He doesn't have to prepare anything. He doesn't have a script. They ask him questions and they talk to him beforehand. But, they don't want to be up there either. None of those no one wants to be a witness, right? And if they do, then you got to question their veracity.
Yeah. By the way, Fred and Ethel have their own Instagram, Fred Ethel STS. I just posted today. Fred's a wild man. He's a pug. The guy follows me everywhere, and he begs for food, and I've done everything to try to stop it, and it's just going to go on from the womb to the tomb, as they say. I have no hope of rehabilitating him at all. Another amazing show, another amazing panel, has nothing to do with me, everything to do with the best guests and STS Nation. Tim Jansen is the famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, a former prosecutor, federal prosecutor. And hopefully, I called Tim today and I said, "Hey, Tim, it's kind of a big ask, but do you think we could do our evening shows at your office?" And he said, but Tim, honestly, you don't have to say yes, but it would be nice, and we'll figure it out. But
I'll let you know.
the evening shows could be sponsored by Jansen and Davis. You never know. Tim Jansen, I'm going to leave it open-ended. We are literally 5 days out from jury selection. It's coming, and I've heard a lot of pundits, legal pundits, say this is going to be a trial to behold. This is going to be something different than other trials. Your closing thoughts?
I think it is going to be a good trial, because you know what? The lay people in this community love it. The lawyers like it. There's issues. You've got a great judge who explains things. You've got a not likable defendant from people reading of the emails and text and the privilege she was given. And then you have a likable victim who was in the prime of his career as a law professor, was gunned down because he wanted to basically raise his children. So you have everything that makes people fighting for Dan and making sure the people who are responsible are convicted. And this is another step. And I think it's going to be a worthwhile effort.
By the way, Tim, this is a great question or comment from Ida. Don on Cross, was it all worth it? It seems like a really effective question. My other question to you, once you answer this, is, do they sit, like, did Georgia and Sarah literally sit in a room together and think up these questions? And how does that process play out?
Just remember this: Georgia and Sarah are the front people. There's a whole team of people behind Georgia and Sarah. They're doing legal research. They're doing witness preparation. They got Jason Newland, the investigator. They're finding leads, evidence, getting witnesses there. They're doing things that make their job better. And they come across and they get that information, and it's great. It's a production, and they're doing a great job. So it's not just Georgia and Sarah, it's the whole state attorney's office and the FBI,
Yeah, that's really well said. In our case, it's the COE, Steve Cohen, Space Coast on the West Coast, the mods, STS Nation. It always takes a team. Our team just happens to be smaller than the Tallahassee SAO. But there you go. One last question for Pro here from Jody B. Sorry for all the questions, but you can never ask a professor too many questions. I really want to know if this is going to be drawn out. So when they arrest Wendy and Harvey, is it going to be one at a time? I just feel so bad for the Markels. There is some fatigue with this. Joe Poe, do you think they're going to be arrested? And if so, is it going to be sequential or together if it happens?
Yeah, I said this before. I think with all the inferences from the evidence, if the jury goes that way, I do believe there's enough to convict Wendy. It will be an uphill, battle to do it, but I do think there's enough. And I also believe that after this trial, it's very unlikely more evidence is going to come up. Whatever they have now, they may not disclose it all at this trial, but I think they're at the end of the line in terms of evidence against her. And so I think it's a, Fisher cut bait. And my own instinct, what I would rather do is give it a try and not get a conviction, so long as I have a reasonable basis for believing I could get a conviction, than to sit and wonder and feel maybe a little bad that I didn't try. I think that Wendy will be arrested after this trial is over. And maybe Harvey too, if they think, I don't know that they think they have enough for him to do it. But it seems to me, if they're going to do it at all, it probably should be with Wendy, in part because he's getting older, and in part because, of the motion that the defense made this time, that it's protracted and you're waiting. And it seems to me that they, if they're going to do it, maybe this is the time to do both. So that's my view. I don't have anything more than we all know about what the evidence is and where we are. And it's also my hope, because as I've said before, I have a visceral reaction to Wendy, and it's not a good one. So I would like to see her prosecuted.
Couldn't say it any clearer than that. Propo, are you going to come on next week, the week after, and the week after to give us your analysis?
Sure.
Not every day, but you know what I'm saying.
No,
Survivor,
you
Survivor.
couldn't, you only every day. I mean, that would be
Yeah,
de trop, as we say in France.
Look at this.
But
3
better than
kids.
I just said it.
3 kids, 2 dogs, 1 Joel, and a goat. No big deal. Throw in an iguana. COE, the co is the goat. Goat milk is very healthy. I think goats are darling. Black Witter always cracking me up. I do have artificial grass grazing on your plastic grass. And then this one, this is in the book. This is a true story. I did once buy a pair of $800 loafers. I'll tell you another part of that story. I've never worn those shoes. They're still in the box because I'm too afraid to ruin them. So there you go with materialism. Get your fiance a goat. Don't waste your money on a ring. My best friend is in the jewelry business, in the diamond business. Shout out to Mike Littman. There's the shot of Charlie being admitted into, I don't know, I'm just blanking on the word, into the Leon County Courthouse. This is 9/8/2024. Very quickly, Joe, what do you think of how he's looking? And then Tim.
I think he's looking better now than the pictures I saw of him 6 months or a year ago. He looks in better shape, I think.
Yeah, he looks okay. I can't tell if his hair, is pulled back. Tim Jansen, what do you think?
Well, he's been working out, it looks like, and he's keeping in shape, probably for good reason. That's why he was moved to South Dakota, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every day he's got to look over his shoulder.
Yeah. Well, there you go. An amazing panel. The 2 of them, Propo and Tim Jansen, always with incredible insight. Tomorrow, 1:30 tomorrow, there is a manhunt going on in Kentucky. Scott Duffy, FBI, and America's most respected detective, Phil Waters, they're going to break that down. And then it is literally all Donna Adelson all the time, starting on Tuesday. Morning session of court, lunch live, afternoon session of court, evening show, hopefully hosted by Jansen and Davis. Tim, go watch football. Joe Poe, thank you. Love you, America. Love you, Tallahassee. Justice for Dan Markel. Tim already jumped off. He had to go watch.